Hi, welcome back to my channel. This is Tiffany Travels. We help women and families travel, build wealth, and live richer. So today we have a special guest. We have Picky Girl Travels. I'm going to bring her on so she can talk to us more about her move to Mexico City. Hi,
Hello, hello.
how's it going?
Huh, it's going. I mean, I say that. It's fine. It's going.
Okay, so why don't you start by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do at your work with gap years and that kind of thing.
My name is Adelia Borchade. I am probably best known as Picky Girl Travels the World. I am a financial confidence coach. I firmly believe that everybody has the capability of making good, sound financial decisions. And so much of the work I do revolves around helping women, particularly Black women, understand their finances and leverage them in order to live the life that they want. I am also half of Reclaim the Retreat. It is a unique retreat experience for women and femmes where we work with you to help you live the life that you want. So that's what I do. Um, and I forgot what else you wanted me to say.
So your move to Mexico City, because you say you're a financial coach, was that more of a financial decision or was it more a cultural decision, like trying to get away from the US or both?
I would definitely say it was a cultural decision. I left the US in 2016. I initially had a job in Honduras. And then I chose to come to Mexico City next and ended up falling in love with it. My initial desire to leave the US, um, I not that it matters, but I would not say that I was trying to get away from something. With me in the United States, there was a values misalignment. Things that are like fundamentally important to me are not the same things that are valued in American culture. You know, freedom from religion, the idea that healthcare is a right. I believe it is a right in the United States. It is considered a privilege. You know, there are those kind of fundamental values mismatches where it just became obvious to me that I would not be able to live my fullest, best life there. So I decided to go abroad. And in doing that, I discovered when I first moved to Mexico City, because I was taking a gap year, that because the cost of living was at a point that if I stayed abroad, I could decenter work in a way that would not have been possible for me in the US. So there is a financial piece to it, but that wasn't the motivation for why I chose to live here.
Okay, so you said you moved to Honduras and then Mexico City. Why did you pick Honduras and then why did you eventually pick Mexico City?
Um, for real, in both situations, both places chose me. In the States, I was a K-12 educator. Part of my career was spent in the classroom, history, geography, social studies. The other part of my career was in instructional technology. And I had gotten to the point that I just decided I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to leave the US. Um, and my preference would have been not to teach abroad. However, I wanted to go sooner rather than later. So I leveraged the career I already had and used that to get out of the US. And so I had decided that I wanted to learn Spanish. So that limited me to Latin America. just so happens there was a teacher job fair specifically for international schools in Latin America being held in Houston, where I lived. And the very first school I spoke to was the school in Honduras. And it was as if someone had looked at my resume and created a position specifically for it. And so to me, I was like, all right, bet. Here I come, Honduras. And unfortunately, the school was not in a financial situation with some drops in enrollment to be able to keep me on in the capacity they hired me for.
Mhm.
They wanted to keep me, but they also wanted to probably triple my workload. And I was not interested in that.
Mhm.
And so I told them no, thank you, and decided to take a year off. And where to spend that year off. I was supposed to be in Honduras for 2 years. I had already started thinking ahead, like when this job is over, where do I want to go next? And I had narrowed it down to two places, Mexico City and Medellin, Colombia.
Mhm.
And my plan, not knowing that I wouldn't stay at that school for another year, my plan was okay, I'll visit one place this summer during my travels. And then when I travel some more next year, I'll visit the other, and then I'll decide which one I want to go to. Well, when they sprung this new job situation, restructuring, they called it, on me, and I had already bought a ticket to Mexico City for the summer just to kind of come and see what it felt like. And then that became I'm moving to Mexico City.
Got it.
So I moved here sight unseen.
Okay, got it. And then, so you fell in love with the city. Like, how does it compare to Houston?
I did fall in love literally instantly. The minute I got here, I was like, oh, this is where I'm supposed to be. How it compares to Houston, um, the actual geographic size of the city is very similar. Technically, Houston is slightly bigger, but Houston, the metropolitan area population is probably about 4 or 5 million. Here, it's probably about 21, 22 million people. So
Yeah, it's
there are a
huge.
lot more people everywhere. That's probably the first thing most people notice. For me, the weather. I moved here in the summer and I would have to put on a hoodie to go walk my dog in the morning. And coming from Houston
Yeah,
in July and August, that I was just like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. So that part I really, really liked. Um, people in Houston are very friendly. People here are as well. But I know a lot of people think about like moving abroad and they think Mexico, that's not that different than the US. That's like right next door. That's not really going abroad. Well, you don't have to spend much time here to realize that Mexico is very different than the United States. And this particular city, it's a wonderful kind of chaos.
mhm,
And if you are not like if that's not something that sounds exciting to you, this might not be a good place.
right. I see a couple of people join the live stream. Feel free to say hey in the chats in the comment here, or if you have any questions for Adelia, just post them over there as well. Let's see here. So,
Sure, right, cool.
did you ever make it to Medellin?
No. Um, I didn't get to stay in Mexico City as I had hoped. And I was here for a year, and then I ended up spending 2 years in Asia. And my plan was when I was leaving Asia, it would have been the summer of 2020. I was going to kind of try a few places out. I had residency here. I knew I was going to end up back in Mexico City, but I was like, oh, maybe now I'll go spend a little time in Medellin. And then the pandemic happened and
Okay.
borders were closed. And
Uh,
so I was like, okay, I'm just going to go home to Mexico then. So I
uh,
still haven't been yet.
I got it. Okay. So, Where did you go in Asia, did you say?
I lived in Kuwait and I lived in China.
Okay. And so back to Mexico City, how has your quality of life improved, like as a result of moving there?
My quality of life is probably the best it has ever been. And I know people are going to hear me say that and they're going to be like, but it can't be better than living in the United States. But it is. I have I don't, and this does come with a great deal of privilege, but I don't have the stress, trying to balance like work and personal life. I don't have that stress. I lost that the minute I moved abroad. Um, the way in which I can live my life here is such that like I don't have the well, one of the obvious things being a Black person in the United States, I don't have the fear of random gun violence, police violence, that sort of thing. Um, just what was it? When was Halloween? A couple weeks ago, we
Yeah.
were out and a man who appeared to have escaped police custody ran by us. He looks back and laughs, and we can see his hands are handcuffed behind him. And we're like, is that a costume or what? And we turn around and here come about 20, 30 cops chasing him on foot. And those old timey like cop thing movies where they're all like, it's like how many cops can pile out of this car and they can't, it was very much that, but in real life. And they ended up chasing him down into the subway and they're holding up the subway. It's like 40, 50 cops in there. And I just thought about in that moment, I thought if I was in the US, I would be my anxiety would be on 12.
Hmm.
I would be freaking out. I'd be worried about is this gonna end in violence? And I could confidently say to my American friend who was with me, like, we don't even have to worry. Nobody's going to get shot here. This is just, like it's hilarious because the cops were like, some of them, their pants were too tight.
Uh-huh.
Like it was hilarious, but it was not lost on me how if that was playing out in the US, I would feel different. My safety would be different. So, there's that part. I get to live in the cultural capital of the Americas. There is probably only one city in the world with more museums than there are here, London. So like the between the food and the museums and the art and the music and it's an incredible place to live. And so I'm very fortunate and I've been able to create a life that is literally like the life of my wildest dreams.
Okay, so you talk about not having to balance work and family, the work and social. So how has it been connecting with family and friends since you moved abroad? Like, do you see them? Do they come visit you? Do you go visit them? Have you lost touch with some people?
A little bit of all of that. My my friends have come and visited me. A couple of family members have, but I also go back. I have three young grandchildren, and only one has her passport. Like she's come and spent time with me in the summer twice. And then when her little sister gets a little bit older, she'll get to come too. Um, so I spend time there, and I'm gonna keep it real. I don't spend a lot of time in the US because I do not like to be there, but I do go back to visit. I will be going back to visit for my birthday, and we're as a family going to do some things together. There are people that I have lost touch with, and part of that is when I come back to the States, like it's a Tuesday morning. Most people are at work
Yeah.
and like can't hang out with me or that sort of thing. or I'm in town for such a short period, I have to be very selective about what things I'm going to do. And so I've been able, some friendships have carried on the way that they, just like nothing has changed. And then some others have kind of, petered out. It's very, I do enjoy it when people come to visit me because I think there's always a bit of skepticism people have about like Mexico City. They think it's a very, very dangerous place. And I think they struggle to reconcile me saying, like, oh my gosh, I'm having the time of my life
Yeah.
versus what they hear and see on the news. So I always enjoy people coming here so that they can like see for, firsthand what it's really like.
Awesome. So you mentioned a Tuesday morning. So you mentioned the Tuesday morning and the other people at work. So what does your Tuesday morning look like? You wake up, what happens?
What happens? I get something to eat. What I want to happen is I want to get up and go for a walk, and I could do that. The only thing that is standing in my way is me. No, I get up, I get something to eat. Um, I maybe do a little yoga, and then I walk into the office probably somewhere between 8 and 9. I get up without an alarm clock.
Hmm.
The only time I use an alarm is when I'm trying to make sure I get up from my nap.
Hmm.
So I come in here, I answer a few emails, I do a little something for maybe a couple hours, and then it's time to go get lunch, to go get tacos somewhere.
Uh-huh.
And then I come back and I take a nap. And then maybe we watch some Netflix until we try and figure out what to eat for dinner.
That sounds like the best Saturday. That is doesn't a Tuesday like that is like, yeah, retired life. Amazing. Okay, so let's see. Has it been challenging making new friends in Mexico City?
For me, no. And I'm going to say I'm not making friends was not like a big priority for me. I am introverted. And so this idea of like going out and meeting strangers, no, no, thank you. I'm not interested in that. So it wasn't something that like I set out to do, like, oh, I need to make sure I make friends. But what has happened is being here, you kind of as you connect with people at events, in WhatsApp groups, that sort of thing, it's a lot of people who kind of maybe see the world a lot like you do or have things in common with you. That's probably part of the reason that they also live here. And so I've been able to meet some incredible women. And from that, I have gotten some really good friends. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't something I necessarily set out to do. I've kind of seen it as sort of like this unexpected bonus. Um, I don't think making friends with other foreigners is necessarily that difficult. I've struggled a little bit getting to know locals, again, because I am introverted and I don't want to talk to anybody in English or in Spanish. So that's something that I am working on. Um, I will say that I made local friends a lot like I did in the US. Someone I know who is more extroverted than I
Mhm.
is like, oh, come with us to this thing. And then I meet other people that they know. And then now I know some new people.
Okay, so speaking of the Spanish, has the language been difficult, challenging, like ordering just regular stuff, like even paying rent or setting up your utilities, or I don't know, ordering food or drivers?
Um, it's been a process. I was very foolish, and when I initially left the US, I was like, "Oh, I'm from Texas. I know some Spanish." No, I didn't. Um, I could say, like, "Hello, goodbye, thank you. Where is the library?" Stuff like that. Because I never took Spanish in school. I took French, I took Latin. So literally, I was starting with nothing. But I had taught kids who'd come to the US and picked up the language in 6 months. So I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll be living in Latin America. It will be osmosis, and I'll magically be able to speak Spanish. And that did not happen. Um, After a year in Honduras, I had what I like to call grocery store Spanish.
Okay.
So I knew the names of foods. I knew like how to ask the butcher for a pound of chicken, that kind of stuff. Because I am a picky eater, I picked up words for like things that I don't eat so that if I am at a restaurant, I can look at a menu and be like, oh no, I don't want that. And then I got to Mexico and I thought, oh, I've been living in Honduras for a year. I got Spanish. No, I didn't. No, I didn't. The grocery store Spanish could get me to where I could order food. But like even that was difficult because I thought, and this was my arrogance, I'm from Texas. Know what a taco is, know how to order a taco, except there are 3,700 different types of tacos. They have names that I had never seen before. So I'm looking at the menu and I can read the words, but I don't know what they mean. So from that, I have gotten my Spanish to the point of like I've found both of my apartments myself. Um, the only utility here in Mexico that you really have to get on in your name is your internet because lights, gas, all of that, it stays in the owner's name no matter what. So you don't have to, but I do have to navigate like paying that kind of stuff. Grocery shopping. Um, like when I came back to Mexico in 2020, this was at the height of the pandemic, and I was sitting in an empty apartment. So I had to figure out how to buy things online, figuring out the word like, what's a hanger in Spanish? I had no idea, looking for a desk. I want a desk with drawers. What's the word for a drawer? I didn't know that either. So my Spanish, I would say, is functional. It would be miles from where it is now if I was willing to talk to people, because everybody will tell you that's how you learn a foreign language. You've got to speak it, you've got to use it.
Yeah.
And, Uber drivers are famous for, you get in a car, you speak a little Spanish, and they want to have a conversation. And that would be a great time to practice. And in my brain, the whole time I'm thinking, when can this conversation end? Please stop talking to me. That's not good when you're trying to learn another language. So, but I did like a few weeks ago, I went to a dinner party, and the vast majority of the people there did not speak English. I could understand the majority of the conversation, um, but it took me a little work to be able to ask and answer questions. So I don't know. My Spanish is a work in progress. It is much better than it used to be. It is not as good as it could be.
Okay. So if you just joined, feel free to say hey, say hi in the chat here, or any questions that you have. So before you moved to Honduras, you were traveling and just had Houston as your base, right? So what were some of the places that you went to? Have you been to Africa?
Had I been where?
Africa.
No. Well, yes, I take that back. when I was married, we'd gone to Egypt, spent 2 or 3 weeks in Egypt, took my kids. The youngest was 5, the oldest was 11. So I didn't get back to Africa until 2018. Um, and so, but prior, I had been to, before I left the US, I'd been to probably like 20, 25 countries, maybe something like that. Mostly Western Europe, although I had visited China twice.
Hmm.
Definitely never thought I'd live there. Um, and Thailand, I think, is that the only place I've been in Asia before I left the US? Mostly Western Europe and a little bit of Latin America.
Okay. Okay. So living in Mexico, what are some of the things that you feel you couldn't have done um, if you were still living in the US?
I could not, I don't think I would have ever taken a year off.
Hmm.
Um, I don't, one of the things I did, I thought it was super cool. The monarch butterflies migrate to Mexico for the winter.
Okay.
And we went to the butterfly sanctuary, and there were like hundreds of millions of butterflies, monarch butterflies everywhere. Like to me, I was like, oh, that's so cool. Um, what else could have I done that? Oh, one of my favorite memories here. Um, it was a Sunday. On Sundays, the principal boulevard in the city, they close it down to make it open for pedestrians, runners, bikers, all of that kind of stuff. And so we walked from one end all the way to Centro Historico, stopped, got some hot chocolate, and then we were like, oh, okay, let's walk around in here. We just happen to turn a corner, and there are hundreds of people dressed in like traditional Aztec, indigenous gear, and they're all dancing synchronized together. Apparently, it was a celebration day for one of the Aztec gods, and
Oh,
it was one of those cultural things that like I don't I'd never seen anything like it. And what struck me so much was this was just a random Sunday. I happened to walk downtown and turn this corner. And here's this huge event, this huge cultural thing, but it wasn't like a festival per se. It was more intimate than that. And so it's like those kinds of experiences which happen fairly often here, that like nothing like that I ever experienced when I was in the US. So it's always something like
hey, Jamie. So just for some of the people who are joining, we're here with Adelia. She has her own channel here on YouTube. It is at Adelia. You could just put it in the chat, or can, you can send it to me. So I'll put your link in there, or you can say it.
that. It's either under my name, Adelia Borchade, or Picky Girl Travels the World. You can find it that way as well.
Good. Okay, so you were talking about tacos earlier, and I think I heard you mention maybe on another show that it's not the same as the U.S. Like the tacos in Mexico are not like tacos in the States. So how does that compare? And then how do you like the other food there in Mexico, Mexico City?
I lived in Texas for 41 years, and people rave about Tex-Mex, they rave about Mexican food, and I was kind of like, whatever. Like that just was not that would not be my choice. Um, and so then I came here, and I remember I was at this little mom and pop place, and I'm The only word I recognize is flautas. Like I do have some context. I know what a flauta is. It's a rolled tortilla fried that's stuffed with like meat. And then there were these other things. And I'm texting my friend back in Texas who speaks Spanish. And I'm like, what's a oh now I forget the name. And I put the name in there and she's like, dirty girl? And I was like, I don't think that's what it means because it's a taco. And so also in the US, I would not touch a corn tortilla if you paid me good money. I was like, why would you ever eat a corn tortilla when there are flour ones? And
Right.
that's because I'd never had one here.
Hmm.
And so I am now a tortilla snob. Like I don't want tortillas out of the package. If there is not a little abuela over there making them by hand as people order food, I don't want it. I don't want any of that. One of the unique things here in Mexico City is because it is a destination for people in Mexico, because there are regional differences in the food. I get to taste a little bit of everything from all the different parts of the country in one place. So, there's always the funny thing of like you come here and you ask for a quesadilla, and people are surprised that it comes without cheese because in Mexico City, they don't put cheese on quesadillas. Now, in the rest of Mexico, they do, but not here. Um, Tacos, of course, are big with me because I don't eat fruits, I don't eat vegetables. So, a lot of the other things that people get really excited about, not so much for me. But you know, I enjoy mole a lot. Um, I was recently in Oaxaca and we were in small indigenous towns, and that's where the good mole is. Um, Say we get real Mexican food from the food trucks made by Latinos. Yeah. Um, I'm trying to think what else is the other thing that I like to eat. If it
Queso.
involves, and there's so many different Mexican dishes that it's all like a remix. There's corn, there's meat, there's cheese, there might be beans. I don't really like beans so much, but like, if it's a torta, um, enchiladas, imoladas, I'm down with all of that. It's now where I do struggle is breakfast. And that is partially that's my problem, the vast majority of that, because I get up very early. Breakfast here is not really till about 10 or 11 a.m. And I'm up at like 6.
Okay. And then what is a traditional hi Danielle, what is a traditional Mexican breakfast? Because in I'm from the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean, as opposed to an American breakfast, it's much heavier and it's much it's like you sometimes vegetables like yams, plantains, and fish sometimes for breakfast. So what is it there?
In this part of the country, because like if you're in the Yucatan, they're going to be plantains. In this part of the country, people will have like a pastry and a coffee when they get up. So like 8, 9, 10, breakfast might be pastry and a coffee. But when people really have breakfast around 10 or 11, that might be chilaquiles, which I refer to as breakfast nachos because they are fried tortilla chips, and then you put salsa on them, and then you top it with some kind of protein. It might be egg, it might be chicken, it might be steak, and crema and cheese. Or it's going to be a lot of eggs,
Hmm.
eggs, beans, tortillas, stuff like that. Trying to think what else. And none of those are things that really want it. That I really eat. So breakfast is a struggle for me because one thing I learned is that certain tacos are only served at certain parts of the day, that you should only eat them at certain times of day. And then there's certain kinds of tacos that are really more of a weekend taco. So
Okay.
like if you want Like I like uh, tacos al pastor. And so I'm ready to eat that at 9 a.m. And everybody else is like, girl, if you eat that before 5 p.m., you doing something wrong. So that is not a morning taco. Um, what is it? Barbacoa.
Yeah.
You're not going to get barbacoa during the week. That's really a weekend kind of thing. Carnitas you can get early. There is a carnita spot by me that opens at 11. But again, I'm up early. So yeah, I had to learn the kinds of tacos that you could get early versus the ones you're supposed to eat late versus the ones that are really more like a weekend sort of thing. So it's a whole much more complicated thing than I really understood. But it's every day is an adventure and it's fun.
Okay, so you said that you're up early and you live in this city with like 20 plus million people. Is it a city that people just generally get up later?
It depends if they're working. There's two stories that go on. If you have to get somewhere, you are probably getting up early. So like at 5 a.m., the metro opens, the mass transit opens at 5 a.m. Um, there's a lot of street food for breakfast that is meant to be like very quick, very convenient. So like there will be somebody who's like on this tricycle with this big basket of pastries, but he also sells coffee and probably has some pre-made sandwiches. Or people, there's certain tamales that are sold in the morning that way. Because, and again, this is my own problem. Because I am a picky eater, I want to say what goes on my sandwich. I don't want a pre-made sandwich that has mayonnaise on it and lettuce and things like that. So any of the like morning quick fast food, that's not going to work for me. Um, but like on the weekend, let's say when people are off, yeah, people are not getting up early. Um, I would imagine most people, because I do get up early, I can get places in like go grocery shopping before everybody gets there.
Uh-huh.
Um, People probably get up closer to like 9 on the weekend. But during the week, because a lot of people think about it, it's a city almost as big as Houston with 20 some million people in it. Most people's commute is a couple of hours each way. So people have somewhere to be, they start leaving the house very, very early.
Okay, so you said you're a picky eater. So the name Picky Girl Travels, does that have to do with the eating?
Yes, yes. It's kind of started off as sort of like a self-deprecating joke because anybody who's ever eaten with me, and I see Brown Girls Invest in the chat, she's eaten with me, she knows. Um, like it's an experience. And yes, I understand. I have the palate of a 5-year-old. Oh well, I have been this way my entire life. But yeah, that is where that name comes from. Now, it does turn out that I am picky about a lot of things, more than just food, but that's originally where it came from. And so that was something else I had to learn was like tacos here generally come with onions and cilantro.
Mhm.
I don't eat either one of those. And so I would try to like say, plain. I didn't, I had to learn the right word for that was like naturales or sin nada, which actually means without nothing. Because what did I add? I one time said, solo carne, just meat. And that is literally what I got. I did not get even a
Go
tortilla.
back.
So that's something I have had to learn. And several places that I frequent often, they know when they get to me. Um, I've had a friend pick up an order for me, and I think they thought we were I don't know because we're both Black. I don't know if they were like, oh, okay, it's the Black girl. This is what she gets. And she tried to order her food with everything. And everybody in the kitchen kept coming out and being like, but, and confusing us. So it is, it's generally something everybody just laughs at here. You know, when I have had to learn to, like onions. I consider onion to be a vegetable. So I'll say like sin verduras, sin vegetales, no vegetables, no. And they're like, okay. And then it comes with onions. So then I had to learn that like I need to ask specifically, or I need to just go down a list of things and explain, you know, only want this, this, and this. So it's, I don't mind it, you know. Most of the people I have dealt with are good sports about it and just laugh and are more like shocked, like, how are you an adult and you don't want this, or you don't want that, want to eat that?
Right. Okay, so you moved to Honduras, and then you mentioned you have kids. So did your kids come with you, and how was that like with the international school? I guess you were working at an international school.
Yeah. My youngest initially was not interested in going abroad with me. She was like, "That's great. Go do your thing." I'm not interested. And then she changed her mind, and I had already accepted a job at an international school. And as part of the package, they would cover her tuition, which was a good thing because considering how little money I made, um, and the cost of her education, that just wasn't going to work. So that's one of the benefits if you are a certified teacher working at international schools around the world. Your package will include housing, flights, visas, tuition. Depending on the school, it might be two children, it might only be one child. It just all depends. So she went to the school that I worked at. It was a very, very small school. She was a sophomore. There were, I think, a total of 7 sophomores.
Tiny.
So it was a really good experience for her in that she left a public school setting in Texas where it's very easy to get lost in the shuffle to a situation where you could not avoid your teacher. You couldn't get away with like not turning in homework and nobody noticing for a week and a half. Um, so she had the kind of attention from her teachers that she'd never had before. The students were, some of them were local, some of them were also foreigners. Their parents, worked at uh, NGOs or at the embassy, that sort of thing. And so it was a really good experience for her, kind of like broadening her horizons. And because of some things that she wanted to do uh, in school in Texas that we couldn't replicate there, she ended up going back to Texas.
Okay, so then you moved to Mexico City alone, right?
Yes. Well, I had a dog at the time.
Okay, okay. And then, so I've heard, because I'm in real estate here in South Florida, I've heard women talking about that they want to sell, given the recent political climate, they want to sell and they want to move, but they have reservations about, their partner maybe doesn't want to go, or their kids, or their house. They have like property. What would you say to women who are hesitant?
Um, I would say that they really need to examine what are those hesitations about? Like, are they things that really have no basis? Like, people are like, oh, well, I want to move, but I'm by myself and I wouldn't want to be in that country all by myself. Um, but you live alone where you live now. You
Mhm.
go about your everyday life solo. Like the same way you do that in Florida, that's how you do it somewhere else. Is it, are there things you're afraid of? And are they things you are really afraid of? Or are they things that you're carrying somebody else's burden? Like, I know some people feel that, you know, if I go abroad or I sell my house or whatever, it's like all the things that we're supposed to do to signify that we've made it. Like, I'm not doing those things if I go there. Well, do you care about those things?
Mhm.
Because if those things are important to you, you can stay in the US, or you can own a house in other countries. You know, might not be as easy to sell if you decide to, as it is in the US, but like people own homes other places, people raise children other places. So I would ask that they really examine the things that are making them hesitant. Where is that coming from? And then also, this, I think some people are afraid, like they want to know that it's going to all work out. And it's like, when you get up every day where you live now, do you know that? No. You make the best choices you can with the information you have. Um, you try to anticipate some things and have a plan, but you don't let that stop you from living your life where you are right now. So why would you let that stop you someplace else if that is something that you really, really want? And for me, it was.
Right. Okay. So how has dating been in Mexico City?
Um, my dating life is always an adventure. It's no matter where I am. In Mexico was no different. Um, there are some cultural differences, and maybe not the ones people would think about. So I was on dating apps in the US, I was on dating apps in Mexico. And going from that point where you match and let's go out and meet, that flowed fairly effortlessly in the US. In Mexico, I think some people were just using the apps just to find somebody to chat with. Like getting to the actual date, an actual date, there were a lot of people that just for whatever reason, they couldn't get it together to make that happen. And so that was different to me, very unusual. Um, I went on some dates, and I will say that here in Mexico, and probably more so in Mexico City, because the city tends to be less conservative than the rest of the country. Um, PDA, public displays of affection, are very normal, common. It doesn't matter if you are 55, 25, or 15. People show their affection vigorously in public.
Mhm.
And so that's something to get used to, because, what we might feel is appropriate based off of living in the US, here, like first date, somebody calling you amor and love and professing, declaring themselves to you, like that's to be expected fairly early on.
Yes.
So there's some differences there, but for the most part, at least in my experience, men are men. And just like I had some ridiculousness in the United States, I had that here too.
Okay. So if money wasn't an issue, where would you live in like globally? If you could live anywhere.
I would say probably here, but because see, I was gonna say money really isn't the issue. Or at least in my head, it's not about money. It's about, because I'm very practical, I'm thinking about where can I get a visa? There are countries in which I would really love to have a residency visa,
Uh-huh.
but the amount of bureaucracy involved,
Uh-huh.
I don't want to deal with. So I guess if I've got enough money to hire somebody to handle all of the bureaucracy, um, if it's not here, it would probably be Italy.
I love Italy.
That's the answer this week. Next week, the answer might be something different, but this week, that is the answer. Um, and like, I don't necessarily think from a financial perspective, it's that much more expensive than where I live now, but I know the hassle the immigration process is, and I don't want to deal with that. So if I had enough money to pay somebody where I just had to show up and take pictures and get fingerprinted and they did everything else, I would consider that.
Yes, I love Italy. It's like my favorite place on the planet. The food, the culture, the laid backness, the no rushing, the wine, the everything. I do love it there. But the thing that is interesting is that they don't have birthright citizenship. So if you move there and you have a kid, they are not Italian citizens. So that was kind of interesting. I already have a daughter; she's a U.S. citizen. So, but it's just something to think about.
Yeah, Italy reminds me in a lot of ways of Mexico,
Hmm.
like the laid backness,
Hmm.
the cafe culture, just kind of everybody living life at a slower pace.
Hmm.
That reminds me of here a whole lot.
Okay. JB says Seychelles. Where is that?
Seychelles is is it in the Indian Ocean, off the coast of Southern Africa, former French colony, I think.
I've never heard of it, and I butchered the
I'm
name.
not big on I'm not big on island life. I do not enjoy the beach or the sand or the ocean. So a lot of those kind of places, I'm like, yes, they're gorgeous, but that's not someplace I want to live.
Yeah, you mentioned Mexico City. You said it was not that hot in the summer, and so what about the winter? Does it get extreme in the winter?
The first winter I was here, this was something else I had to learn because the elevation, first of all, is more than what was it like 7,500 feet above sea level, give or take, something like that. So very high elevation, but we're in the valley. So mountain ranges on either side. Air conditioning, heat, not really a thing here. The walls tend to be cinder block, no insulation. Okay. So in the summer, it doesn't really get hot enough that that's a big deal. Well, my first winter here, I was unprepared. I didn't really understand what that meant living in buildings without insulation. It
Hmm.
is often colder inside than it is outside. So let's say it's a 60-degree day, but in your apartment, it might be 50. And mentally, in my head, during the winter, you come inside and it's toasty and you get cozy. And I could never get cozy. I had to sleep in my hiking socks and thermals and a hoodie, and I had to be under a blanket. That year, it actually got down to freezing. It doesn't typically get that cold here. Now, into the 40s, yes, but it got down to freezing. They had to close school.
Oh wow.
And what was interesting was it wasn't because it stayed at freezing. When you were outside that day, it was probably like 55, 60. But inside the buildings, the school buildings, it was still too cold. Um, Global warming, I can see the difference here from what it was like in 2017 versus the last 2 years. Um, it is warm, like to this week, it has been in the high 70s. There's no way it should be that warm in November here. We should all, well, I should be wearing hoodies every day already. And so it's warmer than it should be. Um, and it hasn't gotten in the last couple of years all that cold, down into the high 40s at best in the city of the center, in the center of the city. When you get out to the far reaching parts of the city, it does freeze out there, but it's a lot more rural out there. It's still technically the city, but it's less populated. So it's sort of like I've heard people compare it to, is it San Francisco? Is that the Bay Area?
Yeah. San Francisco.
where you generally want to have a sweater or a jacket at night. There's a big difference between, are you walking on a street that's well shaded? It'll be much cooler than if it isn't. It's that kind of, and then it's dry, very dry here.
Okay. So, do you travel as much now that you live in Mexico City? Do you travel as much as when you lived in the US?
No. And I have come to the conclusion that part of that is because I have the kind of life I don't need to take a vacation from.
Mhm.
Um, you know, when I came back here, because when I was in Asia, when I was in Kuwait, I was in a different country every weekend. I hated Kuwait with a passion. Uh, when I lived in China, when we got time off, I was gone. And so when I got back here in 2020, it's the pandemic, really hard to travel. Once I started back traveling, I was gone quite a bit. The first half of this year, I did a lot of traveling, but I don't have I used to have this kind of like need, like I would get itchy if I didn't have a trip planned somewhere every month. I don't have that anymore. Because one of the reasons I chose Mexico City was because they had a good international airport. Like I can fly most places from here. But I like being home. I like being in the city. So I don't travel. I say that now. That's really been true since about June. Because I know somebody is gonna hear me say this and be like, but girl, I remember when you were in a different country every other week. Yeah. So things I have intentionally slowed down this year and into next year. I have some big trips planned, but it is not the constant thing. Like before my dog died, I had a dog sitter. And so I'd text him and be like, hey, I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks. He would come pick her up. I'd be gone. I'd come back. I'd literally be home for 3 or 4 days. And then he'd have to come pick up the dog again because I'd be gone. Like I'm not doing that kind of stuff right now.
Okay, so you mentioned your Tuesday is like you get up, you eat, you maybe go for a walk, Netflix, and then figure out where to eat again. And so you don't teach anymore in Mexico City. You're not in the school. You're not in the schools.
No, no. My last K-12 teaching job was when I was in China, and I had decided I was like, this job is getting in the way of the life that I want to live. So I decided I was retiring from that. Um, I'm I'm not retired in the sense of like, I don't work at all because, yeah, I do have a YouTube channel. I do some coaching. I host retreats, but my relationship to work is very different. And the kinds of things I do for work, very different. But yeah, I didn't want to do anything that required me to be somewhere at a specific time on specific days. That was too much structure for the life that I had in mind.
Okay. So you're doing the coaching and you're doing the YouTube. Do you supplement that with investing or withdrawing from accounts, or is that you only your income's only the active income?
Yeah, I'm working to pay my everyday expenses. My plan was to maybe do this for another couple of years, but now given the election, I may need to rethink that. But no, I work just to pay my everyday expenses.
Okay. And so, what is a must-try dish in Mexico City?
Mm, tacos al pastor.
Hmm.
That's a must try. And then I'm also thinking green chorizo tacos, but definitely al pastor.
Okay, nice. What about pastries? Are there like coffee shops, pastries? Is that a big thing?
Yes, because Mexicans, it's snacks. That's the thing I do love about the culture here is you never have to worry, like I'm gonna get somewhere and I'm gonna get hungry and there's not gonna be anything for me to eat. There is always somebody selling something for a snack. In some way, shape, like snacking is part of the culture, and I love that. Um, Pastries are a big part. There are the traditional pastries, like conchas and that kind of stuff. Um, but there's also a whole segment of kind of like I don't want to say French style pastries, but I mean, they're like croissants, baguettes. There's a little place around the block from us that does a croissant filled with cajeta. I don't know if anybody knows what that is. Like it's like dulce de leche, but I think it's better. It's made with goat's milk, topped with powdered sugar and pecans. And it's like 30 pesos. So what's that? Maybe $1.50? And they're just delicious. And like the idea of being able to pop into, there's always a bakery or a pastry shop or a cafe where I can always get something, a little something sweet. That that is the story of my life. Um, and so I love that part. So there's that, but there's also like the traditional Mexican pastries as well. Is that what is it talking about? Tacos al pastor?
The 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 dish that you said the must try. Did you say the taco?
Yeah, yeah, that is it's a like I said, everything is regional. That is very much a Mexico City thing. If you've ever had like, is it shawarma or no? What is the thing that they have in Germany where they cut the like a gyro where they cut the meat off? Okay, Lebanese immigrants came to Mexico and kind of adapted it here. Here, pork is very big. So it's like marinated pork put on one of those. I don't know what the word is in English. In Spanish, it's a trompo, where the meat spins around and it's got the flame on it and they cut it off.
Mhm.
It's supposed to be served with cilantro, onions, and pineapple. That's my favorite taco. That's quintessential Mexico City taco. Um, so yeah.
Okay, so before you said that you were planning on, I guess, stop working in the next couple of years, but then given the political changes, you're thinking you might need to work longer. So how does the U.S. political climate affect you in Mexico?
Unfortunately, more than I would like. Because when I initially set out to live abroad, one of my requirements it was that it would be a country that kind of stayed out of geopolitical things. I wanted I wanted a country kind of along the lines of a Costa Rica where like they're not trying to invade anybody and nobody's trying to invade them. They're not sticking their nose in other people's business.
Mhm.
Didn't work out that way because just like in relationships you can't help who you fall in love with. um Unfortunately, the saying about like if the United States catches a cold, the rest of the world catches the flu or whatever. I know I'm misquoting it. That is very true here. So I don't particularly like that. If you were to ask me about the things I don't like living here, I don't like the traffic. That's one of the major reasons why I don't drive. I don't like that there are not very many public trash cans. I don't understand that. And I don't like how often Mexico does some of the United States dirty work for it.
Mm.
or like with immigrants coming up through southern Mexico, from Central America, from Haiti, from other places. The United States, they haven't said it publicly, but there have been some shifts in policy in Mexico that are like trying to slow those people down, deport them. And if you look at the Mexican Constitution, that does not align with how Mexico does things or how Mexico did things prior. So I don't love that. And I wish that Mexico, there was less of the US trying to exert influence here.
That makes sense. Okay, so I've done a little bit of research into Mexico City, and there's like Polanco and Condesa, and those neighborhoods are like trendy neighborhoods. So, how is it if you're living outside of those? Because I think of those as like a Soho in New York.
Yeah, Polanco is one of my least favorite places in the city.
Uh-huh.
When people ask for recommendations, that is a part of the city where I virtually have none. I do not enjoy being over there. I don't like the amount of work it takes to get there. Um, Living outside of those areas is my preference. It is what I have pretty much always done in the apartments I've rented. Now, I have stayed in Airbnbs kind of all over the city. When I visited, and after I was living in Asia, I came back to visit to like try out different neighborhoods to see if I liked them better. Um, so when you get outside of those areas, um, I think that's when you get the best of the city. That like that's where like my roommate, the neighborhood she used to live in, when we would be traveling, hosting retreats, that sort of thing, and she hadn't been to the weekly market, the tianguis, when she came back, the people would be like, "Que milagro! Like what a miracle! Where have you been? We missed you." Like you get that kind of thing. You get people who are like genuinely interested in your story and trying to understand what brought you here. You know, you need to, you get to practice your Spanish,
Mhm.
because outside of those areas, Spanish is definitely the language that everybody is speaking. I love the parks here and how they're kind of like a hub of the neighborhood. So I live maybe one street over from a park, maybe two. And there are drumming classes, there are workout classes, there are adult volleyball leagues, there's salsa lessons. Like all of this stuff is happening at the park, like all at the same time. So it's just a really, really cool city, and I think you get to see a lot of that when you're outside of those areas.
How has it been living there as a Black woman? Have you felt like someone was discriminating against you because of your color, or have you just thought this is cultural? Sometimes I go to Italy and they're like not paying attention. Like you're standing there at the desk or at a counter, and they're totally talking to each other. I don't get the sense that it's because I'm Black. I get the sense that it's their culture that they don't run and like because they don't work on tips the way we do in America. So they're just not concerned about you. I really didn't feel like it was because I was Black. I was like, this is an Italian thing.
In my experience, and that's really all I can talk about. So if anybody's watching this and they're like, well, that's not what I heard, I can only tell you what my experience has been. I I've virtually suffered no mistreatment. Like I'm thinking of the times where I felt like, oh, this person is tripping. And it's like this heifer stole my seat on the bus. She didn't, I don't think she did that because I was Black. I think she just did that because she was trifling, stuff like that. Um, so I can't say like that I've had much mistreatment. The times that there have been some times where things have happened, and I know it was because I was Black, and it almost always tends to be in the state of Oaxaca, which is in the path of where migrants who are trying to make it north to the border pass through. I've had situations where I'm asked to show ID
Mhm.
and they're not asking people who are not the same color I am. And I understand they're profiling. I get that. Where we're riding in a car and I'm the only Black person in the car and they stop the car and I'm like, I get what it is. Um, so I've had that kind of thing happen in Oaxaca. I've never had anything like that happen here in Mexico City. Um, there are times when I have wondered, was that person rude to me or did that person not wait on me because they thought I was poor? Because classism is very much a thing here. So is it more of because I was just dressed any kind of way, they made some assumptions, and that's why they were treating me that way? Most of the time, I don't feel like my skin color figures in very much. Occasionally, I might get asked at the bus stop. People want to know where I'm from because, and so some people like this little old man. He was very senior citizen. He's talking to me, and then he finally asked. He was like, "Are you from Haiti?" Because we've had a lot of Haitian immigrants in the city. And I was like, no, I'm from the US. And you could kind of see his mind was trying to make that make sense because I probably don't look like when he thinks of an American, I probably is somebody who looks like me. Um, but yeah, no, I've not. And I know people will often talking about like, because I am the admin on one of the Facebook groups for the city for Black folks, and people will talk about the staring. I I haven't noticed anything like that. Like, and maybe it's a perspective thing because I spent a year and a half in China where I was othered to the nth degree. So somebody glancing over their shoulder is not going to bother me. You know, every now and then I'll catch somebody looking, I'll smile, they'll smile, and everybody goes on about their business.
Okay. I heard China is blatant with their staring and their phones. Like the cell phone is like they got to take a picture so they could show their family, their friends what they saw on their way to work this morning. They said, "You're not gonna believe this." I heard
Yeah.
China is like that.
Yeah, I can remember a time people I worked with, and it was white South Africans, white Canadians, me, Nigerian. We're at the park, just kind of enjoying end of year, hanging out at the park. And the Chinese basically just lined up in front of us and were like watching us like people in a zoo. And we're just at the park like everybody else is. So yeah, they are out there.
Yeah. Okay. So if anybody has any questions for Adelia, be sure to put it in the chat. We are going to wrap up here. Here's her YouTube channel. Again, if you're joining, Adelia has Picky Girl Travels, where she talks about her life in Mexico City and traveling the world, but not so much lately. Okay, so thank you for being on the show. And is there anything you want to add or to tell people?
I would say that if you are thinking about traveling, if you're thinking about moving abroad, go for it. Like, life is too short to not do the things that you dream of. It absolutely is. So if it's something that you want to do, go for it.
Okay, so we will end it there and we'll see you next time. Thanks again.
Oh, you're so welcome.